Hello, my name is Kaysie Atkins. I am the Family and Consumer Science Extension Agent for Sevier County. I want to welcome you to day one of Sevier County Saves Week. In this webinar, I hope that you enjoy today's presentation brought to you by Adam Hopkins from UT Extension Sevier County. We are glad that you can join us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Without further ado, let's dive into Planning for the Unexpected with Adam Hopkins.
Funny memory for me. And I figured, that might be good for Kaysie too. I am wearing a Carson Newman shirt there, and so that might make her feel good. But my dad was a professor and veterinarian at the university, and so he kind of inspired me in a lot of ways. And so after high school, I went on to the University of Tennessee in animal science. And so I do have a 4-year degree in animal science. And so it still might not quite line up to finance. But after I graduated, I started working. I actually have a master's in business administration, focusing on finance and banking specifically. And then I went back again and got a master's of science in ag business and risk management. And so I do have quite a bit of background in business and business planning. And then I did several stints, different places. I worked in Jefferson County. I covered strictly farm finance for about 5 years before coming back here to Sevier County, where I am now. So 3 habits of money smart people. They plan and budget wisely. And so this is pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. But sometimes we need some reminders that budgeting is a big deal. And if we don't budget, if we don't pay attention, then often we don't truly know what we're spending. It's easy to go through the motions and get our paycheck and buy what we want and just assume we're going to have enough. But without budgeting, we really never know if our money is going exactly where we want it to. Is our money working for us, or is it just kind of getting us through the day? They live within their means. This is a tough one. This is something that I think everyone struggles with. Oftentimes I look around and I think, well, my goodness, I feel like I don't have any money and I don't understand where all this stuff comes from. But realizing that I can afford this and this is, within my means is probably important. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we have a lot of wants and things that we would rather spend our money on. But to truly be financially successful, living within your means is vital. The other thing I think that's important to remember is planning for the future. And so we'll step just a little bit into retirement and that sort of things, but there will be multiple talks throughout the week that talk specifically on moving forward in your future. And I think looking forward in all those aspects is incredibly important. So what is financial preparedness? And this can go a million different ways. Honestly, I've defined it as the ability to withstand unexpected financial burdens, stress, and demands. This can come from multiple sides. And we might say, well, is this something's happened to our home? Something's happened to our car? Is this I'm prepared to retire? And so it can mean a million different things. But, in a crisis situation, it's can I withstand something unexpected? This is an interesting slide or an interesting snip that I got off of the FEMA website because it talks about exactly that. It says, so 6 in 10 households in America experience one financial emergency a year. And so that's something unexpected comes up. So 60% of us will deal with something like that this year. A third of Americans don't have savings. That's another one on there. And almost half of Americans would struggle to come up with $400 to help cover an emergency. And so what that tells me, and now this is from 2019, and so it's a little dated, but I would struggle to say that we're all just really killing it compared to 2019. And so this is probably still pretty accurate, but it's something to be aware of. And so if you look at that and you say, oh man, I'm in that percentage, realize you're not in that percentage alone for sure. But realizing that I'm in that percentage also probably tells me that I might look forward and try to do something a little differently. So what is our current financial situation? That's kind of the first thing. And so we say, well, how do we do it? What do we need? Well, we need to know where we are. That's the only way we're ever going to know what we need to improve on. And so we're going to touch a little bit on debt. We're going to touch a little bit on savings, investments, budgeting. All of those things are important to truly figure out where you are in this situation. In general, debt has continued to rise, and so the U.S. consumer debt's at $17.3 trillion, and so that number keeps going up, and so that's a big deal because that's money that we have spent that we have not paid off already. Okay, and I think that that's important to remember. Debt can be a tool, and it's something that we can use, but realize that we are paying someone else for the ability to buy whatever we've bought. Now, that might make sense. You might say, well, I need a house to live in. I'm going to take out a mortgage. And so borrowing money for that makes sense. It might be that, well, I'm going to go out to eat today. Does it make sense to me to pay someone for the ability to go out to eat when I might have other means to do that? Maybe not. So per capita, so per person, Tennessee credit card debt is about $2,800. And so that's where we are as of right now. And there's a 16% increase over from 2022 to 23. So we know debt is going up. That's something that is hard to deny. You know, prices kept going up, and maybe our salaries didn't go up as much as it did. But we need to recognize that there is a rise in that. So when it comes to debt to income ratio, I'm going to use kind of what a lot of lenders like to use, and that's a 36% debt to income ratio. And we'll talk about how to actually come up with that. But I use this number to say this is probably the number where a lender feels comfortable that you can pay something back. And so while some of them will let you go further than that, higher than that, that probably isn't a good idea. And so if we know that someone is playing a bet on us to pay them back, 36% is the number that they say that they likely feel that they can get that money back. And so if we look at ourselves and we say, oh, we're at 42, we're at 45, then that probably means that we're somewhat in, a situation that we need to correct. We need to bring that back down to something that's more manageable, that doesn't continue to keep growing. So this is how we actually get to that debt to income ratio. And this is just a general, this is census data from Tennessee. And so this is an example. But what we do is it's our debt payments divided by our gross income. And so it's not your net income, it's your gross income. And we're going to use most of our big debts. We probably wouldn't use things like our phone bill or our water bill, but we're going to use our car payment. We're going to use our mortgage, some of our bigger loans. The more that you include, the better, right? I mean, the lower the number is in general, or the less debt you have, the healthier you are. But we are typically talking straight debt, and a water payment is not debt. That is just a utility bill. And so right now, the average housing cost is about $1,400 a month, $1,449 a month. The average car payment is $649 a month, and the average credit card payment is $191 a month. So I add all those together, and then I take the average income again from Tennessee, about $5,300 a month. That comes up to 42% debt to income ratio. And so just by going with averages, that's higher than we want to be. And so that's something that is important. That's something we need to recognize. And so if we say, if we are average, we're probably not as financially healthy as we want to be. But it's something that we definitely can and want to improve on. Saving money is another part of being prepared. So we're trying to keep our debt low. That way we've got more flexibility, but we need some money. So $400 is a breaking point for a lot of people, according to FEMA. So what kind of money do we need there? And so oftentimes we talk about an emergency fund. An emergency fund, typically $1,000, $1,500, something in there that would cover most general expenses. If you get a flat tire, or if something breaks in the house, you need a new refrigerator. All those things happen. But what kind of money will take care of the majority of that? And so typically $1,500 is a pretty good chunk. That would be what I consider the baseline. And so we're happy with that being an emergency fund. It's a great starting place to be. Long term, though, we probably need to be more than 3 to 6 months of expenses saved. And so this is different for everybody. You might say, listen, I don't owe on my house. I don't owe on my car, and I can live on $1,000 a month. Then that's great. At the same time, if you're someone that has more debt and you say, well, I do have those payments, I need X amount more. And so that's a individualized, you need to know your own number. But 3 months is really pretty good, particularly if you have a steady job. And so when we see those numbers going up, 6 months plus of savings, that's great. But typically we see that maybe if you're self-employed or maybe you have a job that isn't necessarily as secure as some of our others. All right, so a little bit more about savings. Saving for emergencies is not including vacations. And so that's something, and we're all guilty of this sort of stuff. And so I'm not necessarily calling anybody out. But putting aside for emergencies should be set there for emergencies. The problem is if we dive into that, we say, hey, we're doing pretty good. We've got $1,500. Let's go spend the weekend in Asheville. And we do that. What happens if then we have a flat tire when we're going to Asheville? What happens if our freezer quits working while we're in Asheville? And so those savings need to be set aside for those specific things, particularly if we're in the bracket of only having $1,500 or less set aside. That needs to be there for that specific instance. The trick about emergencies is you never know when they're going to happen. They're inherently unpredictable. We don't know when, we don't know where, and we don't know what. But what we want to do is be prepared for those as we can. Savings can also be an investment. So we talk about the $1,500 mark, or maybe we get into 3 and 6 months. There's a lot of good options out there that we can put our money to work for us and bring money in. Right now there's some high yield accounts, savings accounts, or checking accounts even that are bringing 5% interest, 4.5% interest. And so that money doesn't just need to sit somewhere and lose value. It is good to invest it in some way, but it needs to be invested in a way that we can take it back out. If we put it, for instance, in a CD that's a year CD, all of a sudden that's locked up and I can't use that. I can use something out of my high yield checking account, or I can use something from a money market account. So that can make money. There are ways to do that, but realize it doesn't just need to sit there unless we are at the bottom end of our savings bracket. I'll just touch a little bit on retirement. I think retirement's a really interesting and fun topic, but that'll come later in the week. And so realize, again, when we're talking about savings, retirement savings is a part of that. And so I encourage everyone to be putting into your 401k and your savings, but realize that these accounts are accounts that need to stay untouched. That's not where we want to put our emergency fund. We want that money to stay there and essentially just grow. The problem with taking it out is all of a sudden we run into implications. We get taxes, we get penalties, and that's not what we want to do. All of a sudden, we're just getting a fraction of our money that we've actually put in there or earned. And so retirement savings, particularly in our 401ks, things like that, really need to stay where they are. We're not going to include that in our emergency fund whatsoever. You can get brokerage accounts, and so that might be at Fidelity or Vanguard, whoever that happens to be, as a way to invest your money. And so you might say, I have this money to invest. What do I want to do? Brokerage accounts are great. There's lots of good things you can do with those. Just realize that sometimes without realizing it, there can be some tax implications when it comes to that. Further along, so the 4% rule is something that's pretty interesting that'll pop up on there. So if we have $1 million, that'll bring us about $40,000 annually for the next 30 something years. And so if you say, how much do I need for retirement? That's in there. Budgeting. So you'll see budgeting. This is a snap off of Quick and Simplify. There's a bunch of different apps. All of these are good apps. Pencil and paper works just as well. If we don't know what we're spending, then we'll never know and never be able to move forward. So I think that that's incredibly important as well. Record keeping, the same thing. And so we're going to start simple. Don't think you need to keep track of everything down to, the exact this or that. Now, when we're talking dollars and cents, you're exactly right. But do we need to categorize? Do we need 1,000 categories? Probably not. So we want to keep it fairly simple, consistent, but we need to do it every single month or every single week just to make sure we are doing that. Insurance is an important topic. 9% have no health insurance. 41% of folks in America are in debt with medical bills. And so insurance, definitely pay attention to that. That's something that we need. Here's something that's an important topic, maybe not a fun one, but something that I'll delve into. 32% of Americans have a will. The fact is 100% of Americans will die. And so I think estate planning is something incredibly important. It's something that I've got, some direct experience with, but the need is just it's there. Everyone needs to have all this stuff taken care of, and the sooner the better, because you never know when you'll actually need it. So the first one on here is our living will or advanced care plan. That's going to be what directs our wishes for medical care. Do we want to be resuscitated? Do we want to be on a breathing machine? How far do we want to go with that? The importance to this is not only you get your wishes taken care of, but you're taking the pressure off of a loved one. And so a lot of this stuff, I come from the other side of not necessarily me doing it, but from being the child or being the one on the other side of this. It's incredibly important to know that stuff is taken care of. The first time that my father did one of these, it was really hard to accept because I thought, oh my goodness, I don't want to do this. But the more I read, the more I thought everything he had put down was the same way I felt about myself. And so I think that it's important from a child's perspective, from a spouse's perspective, that way they know they don't have to make that decision. They're already going through enough, whether it be losing you or being, in that situation where you're in some sort of care. Your last will is going to be used for your death. That's your final wishes. And so one of those is going to be definitely important. Again, taking stress off of your family at the time that they are going to be the most stressed. There's also powers of attorney. And so that's a healthcare agent is the medical one. That's on the far right. And so that allows someone to make medical decisions on my behalf. It doesn't necessarily mean that when we make a power of attorney, this person makes all of our decisions right now. This is if I get to the point where I can no longer make these decisions, this is who I'm choosing. And I'm going to choose someone I trust and someone who knows what I actually want out of these decisions. Financial power of attorney is important as well. And so this enables someone to take care of financial matters. So one's for medical, one's for not financial, but both of them are incredibly important. I said that this hits home to me. And so this is a picture of my father. My father was a big influence on me. During the past year, he actually got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so that's something that we've been going through. We actually took care of all our estate planning. It was probably only 4 or 5 months, honestly, before the Alzheimer's diagnosis, and honestly, the rapid decline of what he could physically and mentally do. And so we kind of stumbled upon it with dumb luck. I'd always heard about it, and people had always told me how important it is. But gosh, I can tell you from personal experience, it has made the world a difference, and that's probably the best decision that we made, and one of the most relieving decisions that he has made for me to know this is what we need to do. And so even if you're prepared, some of life's events are unimaginable. I would have never imagined to be in the situation I'm in, but I'm there, and I'm thankful for the times that we have. But at the same time, if we hadn't gotten these things straightened out before, like I said, we didn't have any inclination what would happen. We would be in a completely different ball game. And so I think that that's incredibly important. Communication is also important. And so we're talking about what are our future wishes. Business dealings is a big thing, particularly if we have a business, a farm. I see this a lot. Particularly if you have a child or a spouse and they're involved in any business dealings, they need to know ahead of time because we don't know what will happen. I've been involved with the dairy farms. I remember one specifically, 2 sons worked on the dairy farm their whole life. They were mid-30s, had done it, everything, knew about it. Father passed away. They had to close within a year because they didn't know anything on the business side. And so that's heartbreaking. So communicate against that. Communication helps reduce stress. We also need to let our accounts be shared. You don't have to tell who's in it, what's in it, but letting folks know here's where we find things. This is where the information is. So to finish up with a few resources, I've hijacked this and partly because this is who we use for our estate planning and highly respected people. They've done estate planning with us from the University of Tennessee before, but our attorney works for this firm and they've been extremely helpful. So you'll see passiton.well or passitonwell.com. They've got these free resources. And so some of these are checklists, things you need to do, things you need to see, and what my family should know. And so when I talked about the accounts, that's where you'll see it'll have what are your wishes? Where do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Where are your accounts? Where are your retirement accounts? And so it is a document that everything is right there, taking that pressure off of any loved ones if something does happen to us. So I highly advise you, taking a look at that. I highly advise you working with an attorney for your estate planning. Realize that it can't just write it down on a napkin and think it's good. A lot of this stuff needs to be witnessed, needs to be notarized. But those are some great free resources that you can use when it comes to estate planning. The Tennessee Farmland Legacy. This is another website. I'm showing you this because this is where you're going to start. This is not where I want you to end. The resources tab is where I want you to end. But under other resources, there are publications on working with an attorney, advanced directives, power of attorney, personal information, records inventory, all that. So that's another great, that's a UT website, farmlandlegacy.tennessee.edu. So feel free to check that one out as well. So to wrap it up, in the words of Benjamin Franklin, investment in knowledge pays the best interest. So with that, I will go ahead and move on. If we've got any questions, feel free to ask. It'll again be fairly general. I'd advise you to work with a tax accountant, work with an estate planning attorney. There's a lot of people out there that specialize in this, and so I'd encourage you to work with them as well. Kaysie, feel free to jump in whenever you want.
All right. Thank you so much, Adam, for speaking on that topic. It's a hard one. I like what you said. It's a hard one to kind of put into motion and to talk about, right? Especially with the wills and estate planning and getting ready to start looking at finances and stuff. And so, well, hopefully y'all have some questions, or if y'all don't have any questions or want to put them in the chat, you're welcome to. Adam, if you don't care to go back to that first slide to make sure people can sign in, so they can enter that drawing.
Yeah, and I'll just remind everybody too, if you need to contact us directly. I worked in finance for long enough to know that a lot of people don't like to be very public about this, and that's okay. Just realize that if you want to reach out, we're here, and so feel free to either email us, you can contact either one of us here at the Sevier County Extension Office.
I hope that you enjoyed today's presentation. If you have any questions or comments related to the topic, please don't hesitate to contact our office at 865-453-3695. And remember, we're better together. Have a great day. Bye.